Hello all, Jimmy Lambert here, and welcome to Tea Questions Moonshine Answers. I got nearly 200 individual questions in answer to the community post and video announcement, and I do thank you for the kind words many of you left. That being said, for the sake of keeping this video from becoming a bigger project than Tea and Moonshine itself was, I'm going to group the questions together and paraphrase them to give as complete a picture as I can. First thing I am going to say is that if your question has to do with the content of the finale or content going forward, for the most part my answer is wait and see. There are a few questions about the future of Tea and Moonshine that I can answer, but otherwise, wait and see. Now for the questions themselves. We'll start at the beginning. Where did the inspiration for/idea for Tea and Moonshine come from, and how did it get started? Tea and Moonshine came about because of another video I did called The Mountain vs. the Lion, which is why that video is the first one on the official playlist. That video was meant to be a comical and slightly off-the-wall look at the Rapido Train's UK model of Lion and having it traverse the Western North Carolina Railroad. This is where the British engines in America element entered the scene. At the time, my entire British fleet consisted of Mallard, Gadwall, Scotsman, the Ivat Mogul, and a pair of 040 tank engines which never appeared and are their own story. A short while later, I put out a video on HO scale Norfolk and Western steam engines, and that video got an impressive number of views. That got me to try to pursue YouTube a bit more seriously, and I was looking for ideas for more content. I thought I could take the idea from The Mountain vs. the Lion and expand it into, quote, a comedy for train nerds, unquote, which resulted in Part 1. It was just before Part 1 that I acquired the L1, J50, 5600, and some more rolling stock from Hatton's. Next question, when does Tea and Moonshine take place? Considering we have modern locomotives working with locomotives that ceased to exist in the mid-50s, I would say it takes place somewhere during the month of September-Larch in the year of our Lord 2000 team. Next up, this is a heavily combined question. How long does it take to create a full episode of Tea and Moonshine, and what all is involved? I'll answer this by laying out the process I settled into from about part 3 or 4 onward. To write an episode of Tea and Moonshine, I kept a Google Doc in which I jotted down what I call plot points. These were 1 or 2 sentence notes on story beats or actions. Shadson spots the gun and falls in love, for example. I would jot these down at random times as they came to mind over the course of a couple weeks, so it's hard to say exactly how long it took to write an episode. Once I had about 35 or so plot points written in a story arc I was satisfied with, I'd be ready to shoot video. The club I filmed Tea and Moonshine at has rules against leaving personal equipment on the layout, which is a policy I agree with, by the way. So I brought all the Tea and Moonshine models to the station for each shoot. It would take me a half hour or more to organize and load the models into the car. It's an hour's drive down to the club. Then it would be as much as an hour and a half to unpack and unbox the models. Sometimes it was shorter, but for one part I counted 48 individual models I had on the layout. At that point, with the models staged and ready, I would start working through filming all the plot points. This usually took about 6 to 8 hours depending on how it went and if I took breaks when I needed to. Once I had all the video I needed, it would be another 90 or so minutes to pack all the models back up, and another hour drive home. Sometimes I would shoot 2 parts at the same time, which made for a long day but saved packing and travel time. On more than one occasion, I filmed through the night and got home after sunrise. From there, I would write the narration script, adjusting from the original plot points if things had gone wrong or if I had a better idea when filming, and recorded the narration, which could be a 2 to 3 hour process. At that point, I would edit and export the video, which could be a 3 to 6 hour process. After that, I would upload it, set up the closed captions, and schedule the video to go live at the appointed time. After that, it was a matter of repeating the process for next month. Next up, what are my favorite and least favorite character models to work with, and which derails the most? I think my favorite models are the Bachmann branch line engines. That would be City of Bath, the Ivat Mogul, the 5600, the Standard 4, and Sketty Hall. They look great and seem to run pretty well. City of Bath is about the only British model I have recently pulled out and run outside of filming sessions, even if I still have a little trouble getting the settings on that lock pilot right for that engine. As for the worst, there are a few candidates. The Black 5 and Fairy Battle are both about as close as I've come to necromancy. I bought them both from Hatton's on the cheap as non-runners and got them somewhat functional, but neither was ever quite right. The J50 likes to jump the track and has a Bachmann decoder on board, so I sometimes describe running that thing as like putting one of Elon's brain chips in a squirrel and trying to steer it like an RC car. I think Fairy Battle is the most prone to jumping the track, though. Alright, next up. Is there any cut Tea and Moonshine content, such as cancelled episodes or scripts that were completely rewritten? Yes, actually. There were a few cases where plot points were deleted entirely or set aside for possible use later. As an early example was a planned bit where Mallard, Gadwall, and Scotsman scatter upon seeing the K4 and hide, resulting in an actual game of hide-and-seek spread across 1 or 2 parts. It didn't fit well with the installment it was originally planned for, so it was set aside and I never really picked it back up. As for whole episodes, there were a couple that had their narration completely rewritten and re-recorded. Now, the narration for Part 11 currently out was the second attempt, with the first being completely rendered before I decided the narration just didn't do it for me and I went back to the drawing board. It wasn't a disaster, but I wasn't satisfied. Tank Engine surveys the town to figure out where the inbound cars are going and which cars will be returning to Spencer. The return cars will include some Southern and WNC boxcars, and a DB flat car? Oh no. Mallard counters. The couplers between the wagons aren't made for this kind of strain. The coupler between the wagons snaps, sending both engines flying in their respective directions. The Standard 4 races to hide his half, the still. The K4 explains to the 3 Gresley Pacifics what excessive alcohol consumption can do to a locomotive, and... Gadwall? No... Part 1 went through a dramatic rewrite. Now, my first concept for Tea and Moonshine was for the narrator to be just as unhinged as the action and getting more exasperated as the video went on. I sent that around to a few people for feedback and it got mixed reviews, so I went back and did the dry narration we know today. That first version is still sitting unlisted on my channel, and I'll tell you what, I'll drop the link to it in the description if you'd like to hear the farce that almost was the Tea and Moonshine narration. A similar question was asked if I had pulled content because it went too far. There are a few ideas that were suggested by friends or that I toyed with that would have fallen into that category, but they were usually dismissed before they made it into the plot points. Okay, next question. Was the complete Tea and Moonshine story written from the start, or did I write it as I went? Definitely as I went. I wanted it to feel like it could be a day-in-the-life kind of thing, and we all know how crazy life can be, so I figured a fluid, moving-forward writing style would help it feel more natural. That also gave me the most flexibility so I could tweak and adjust as needed. Considering I did have an engine or 2 die during production, that flexibility came in handy. As an extension of that, how do I keep track of all the plot lines and gags? A simple answer is mentally and re-watching previous installments now and then. Next up, what shows, comedies, etc. did I draw inspiration from for Tea and Moonshine? I grew up watching a lot of 1950s and 1960s sitcoms such as I Love Lucy and The Andy Griffith Show. Actually, a mispronunciation of the word deputy in reference to Barney Fife is where Dippity got his name. I also watched a number of British comedies growing up, such as Fawlty Towers and Keeping Up Appearances. I was also in high school about the time the Asduff movies got their start, so the style of those also had an impact. There were a few gags in the series that had some origins in other things as well. Next up, why did I not give every locomotive a name, and how did I decide if an engine is a he or she? Well, basically because that mirrors how referring to real locomotives seems to work. If the locomotive has a name, the locomotive is referred to by its name. If it does not have a name, it's referred to by its number. But rather than say 9001 wishes 5658 would get off the turntable, I figured it would be more pleasant all around to go by engine class rather than number. As for the he-she matrix, that was mostly by sense of which seemed to fit better, but always with a rule for pairs, that rule being if there is a pair, one is a he and one is a she. This ended up applying to engines that I acquired around the same time. The Standard 4 and Black 5 came together, as did Princess Arthur and City of Bath. In those cases, the rule of pairs came into play there, albeit sometimes names solved the problem for me. On to another. How did I decide on the personalities of the engines? It varies, but where possible I tried to go off what I had heard about the actual locomotives. The LNER L1s actually were prone to hot axle boxes, so I took that and expanded it to a lazy and occasionally angry character. The J50's model, as I described earlier, had a fair bit to do with how that personality came about. In a couple cases, I made the character more of a straight man to play off the insanity happening around it. Okay, next. I got a number of questions about the Crazy County, so I will address the story behind that thing real quick. The Crazy County is a Hornby model of a Great Western County class that was custom painted as PRR K4-1737 on one side, and as Reading G1 Pacific number 108 on the other. The exact origins of it are actually unknown, as it was found at a flea market in Pennsylvania by the guy behind the Thomas's Model Misadventure series, Jacob Geist. He gave it a nickname that still carries behind the scenes, but is not fit for inclusion in the actual T&M videos. That nickname is I bought it from him later. The model is a mechanical disaster area, and I ended up temporarily demotoring it for video shoots. Okay, this is starting to look like it's going to be a very long video if I don't pick up the pace a little, so I'm going to pull some questions that I can answer rapid fire. Who would win in a fight, Scotsman with the special water or Lion? They're about even, I think. Which characters do you wish had more screen time? They'll get it in future shorts. Is there an official chronology to the series? The closest thing is the official playlist on my channel. How big is the club layout? I forget the exact dimensions, but the room is about 50 by 20 by 14 feet, I think. The layout uses a lot of that vertical space. What code of track is used on the club layout? I recall hearing it's code 83 on the southern main line and code 70 elsewhere. How do I film the trains at low angles? I take the camcorder off the tripod and set it on an adjacent track, being very careful not to disturb any scenic materials. Did I use special effects or all practical in the series? The finale has a bit of special effects in it, but the vast majority of everything was filmed with practical effects and a little camera trickery. Did I have to repair or modify models for filming? I put decoders in a number of models, brought the two I mentioned earlier back from the dead, and dealt with general maintenance. Scotsman got his rods all tangled up in the middle of filming part 3, basically right between these shots, but I got him sorted out. How do you store all the models and rolling stock? For the most part, they all live in either their original boxes or wrapped in bubble wrap in replacement boxes. How do I transport the models to and from the club for filming? I piled the boxes into the back of the cab of a pickup truck, sturdiest boxes on the bottom, and hit the road. Do I plan absurd jokes in advance, or just add them when funny? Most of the gags were written with the plot points, but a few came about during filming or when talking with friends. Those were injected during the narration recording phase of the production. How did guns end up in the show? Because it's America. How does the big boy feel about 4014's return to Steam? His thoughts are, 1 freed, 7 more to go. How do I handle background details or continuity between shots? Well, where possible, I shot episodes in order, so context was easy to keep track of. The plot points also made context easy to establish as well. I would either print the plot points out and keep them on a clipboard, or just pull the Google Doc up on a club computer. Believe it or not, every appearance of Herr Brandmeister was shot in one night almost a year before the finale. That model belongs to a guy from Germany who loaned it temporarily for filming. I drew from the small library of video I had of Herr Brandmeister and wrote matching plot points into each episode as I wrote them. I marked those plot points as already filmed and worked around them during the main shoot. While these shots were right next to each other in their final form, months passed between the two actually being shot. Beyond that, I would try to visualize the action. Okay, if these characters are leaving here, the next shot should have X character going by in the background during this next shot over there. Which locomotives did I want to include but never made it? Again, some of the ones I have on hand will appear in future shorts. There were a handful I would have liked to include in Tea Moonshine, but couldn't acquire a model for a variety of reasons. I was looking at a couple Swedish locomotives at one time, an E2 280 and a 3-unit electric, but neither happened. How do I decide which British engines went to North Carolina? Whatever models I had available or could acquire usually made the trip, basically. The models I had before Tea and Moonshine were put together for the sake of enjoying British models. The 5600, J50, and L1 were bought partially for me, partially for this video idea I had. Pretty much everything British beyond that was acquired for video purposes, with only a couple exceptions. In a similar vein, what are the oldest and most expensive models? Well, among the Tea and Moonshine models, I think the APTE takes the title of most expensive, and that was mostly because Rails of Sheffield refused to take the VAT off the purchase price, turning a $400 purchase into a $500 purchase. I emailed them about it when I got the invoice, and they explicitly said they weren't going to do it. I won't be doing business with them again. As far as manufacturing date, I think the J50 is the oldest. It's a Lima model that I believe was made in the 80s. Someone asked why there was a tone change in the first couple of parts. I would say that was more the series finding its footing. Like I said, the original operating principle for Tea and Moonshine was for it to be, quote, a comedy for train nerds, unquote. But as it started to spread its wings, I heard that people who know very little about trains were enjoying it, so I decided to try to make the more obscure references digestible. There certainly was a tone shift after Part 1, though that had more to do with finding a style that worked rather than anything I planned. How did I decide on the balance between story and comedy? I just winged that and went with gut instinct, frankly. I would write the plot points out, sometimes writing out story elements as gags. My writing wasn't a matter of tossing 35 plot points into a list and saying go. I would read over a complete list and see if I was happy with it or if I felt like it needed little revisions. Do I have a favorite Diesel character? Dippity's kind of fun. That's an interesting case, as what you see is what you get with Dippity. He was an eBay find, and the only modifications I made to that model were to install a decoder and replace the couplers. Yes, the model is covered in stickers. I received several questions about the special water wagons, and while some of them fall into the category of wait and see, I will say this. The salt wagon, with the pointed roof, contains a still. The square tank is the receptacle where the freshly distilled liquor ends up. If drained dry, the tank can be refilled by the still. As for who takes possession, that comes down to who wants it and who can take it. The Standard 4 tried to hide it, but Scotsman wanted to drain it dry. While this question wasn't asked, I will go ahead and put this out there. I don't know about you, but I detest mid-roll ads that pop up in the middle of a video where such an interruption was never meant to be. So I disabled mid-roll ads on Tea and Moonshine in my other videos. I told myself that I would never use mid-roll ads unless I specifically formatted the video for that. Now that's exactly what I'm going to do here. We'll take a short break to help pay the light bill, and we'll be right back with more questions answered. Stay tuned. Welcome back. What, with that lead-up, did you think I'd gotten a shady ad block sponsor? Not yet. Now, where were we? Which character would you spin off into their own show? I'm not sure if I really could do that with any one character. I have been involved in some capacity with a number of train-based video series, including The Iron Horseman Chronicles, The Road to Denver, and The Terrible Tale of Clinchfield 311. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that there are only so many places you can go on two rails. How does the Christmas special fit into the timeline? Not very well. I wrote that when I had a different plan for the future of Tea and Moonshine. Given time, I may figure something out. Did model or layout problems ever force a story change? A few times, yes, but it was usually minor things, trains on different tracks, or subbing a locomotive out off camera. The biggest changes happened because I forgot a model I meant to bring on a filming day. Do the locomotives age or develop over time in-universe? After a long time they can get a little loopy, see Lion. Otherwise they seem to keep with it decently well. Do other club members react to filming Tea and Moonshine? Quite a few members are fully aware of it. Several I hang out with regularly have loaned models for video purposes. I do know several of the members I don't see frequently get a kick out of it. If anyone has any serious complaints, I don't think they've ever brought them directly to me. That being said, I make a point of being respectful of the layout and other club members during filming. Even the wild sequences are carefully shot around, so there's only the appearance of live collisions, but no actual collision occurs. If I filmed with other members present, I worked around them and their operations trying to minimize the disruption. There is a kind of funny story here, actually. Early on, when T&M videos were getting views in the mid-hundreds, I was discussing the channel at a regular club run night and alluded to the T&M videos before, saying not many people watch it, only for the club president to turn around and give me a little wave as if to say, I do. Why does the J50 always end up in insane situations? He thinks enough to get into them, but not enough to avoid them. I think. It's hard to tell with that one. What was the trickiest scene to film? There's a couple in the finale that would be contenders, but scenes involving the J70 tram were tricky as that engine had a lot of momentum and I only found out about the brake function after the fact. Still worked out though, and many thanks to Cameron for loaning it. How did you come up with some of the more absurd accidents? I'm hardly sure myself at this juncture, but some of them are taken from actual railroad incidents. For instance, in the 1800s, collisions between locomotives with snowplows would result in engines on top of engines. That's where the Dean Goods gag came from. Things like the German truck flying down the trolley tracks were mostly just mulling over what would happen if different items ended up in different places on the layout. What inspired the running gags, like drinking or fighting? Well, what else might happen during what is essentially a really long and wild road trip for the British engines? How did I come to have so many Southern Pacific models? So, the SP models are not mine. The GS4 that appears in the background belongs to George, and the beautifully weathered diesels and 90s-era stock all belong to Claude. Both are members of NVMR who have been very forthcoming in loaning their models for T&M shoots, and I thank them both again for that. Could you see yourself making more shorts and specials after the finale? The shorts will continue for a good while yet. At the present twice-monthly schedule, the same long filming session it took to make one full episode of Tea and Moonshine can produce 3 or 4 months' worth of shorts. That means I may be able to sustain those. As of the release of this video, I already have shorts lined up through December of 2025. As for specials, that will depend on when or if I feel like doing a full production again. That being said, there are a couple ideas for specials being floated by friends of mine, so we'll see. What will happen to the models once the series is over? For the most part, I'll hold on to them with an eye towards being able to produce specials and shorts. But there are a couple which I may sell. The guys who helped with Tea and Moonshine will get first dibs, but if they're not interested, I may put some of the minor background models on eBay. I'll announce it on the channel if that happens, though. Would you ever hand the series off to someone else? The only way I think that could be practically achieved would be if I were to sell the entire roster of models off to another NVMR member who is also video adept. And the sale price for all of them would total well into the thousands, so I don't think it's likely. Do you plan to keep working on train comedy or move to other projects? I need a break from comedy, but I'm not opposed to returning in the future if inspiration strikes. Would I consider a reboot years from now? Possibly. I won't say no, but it would be a ways out, and I would handle it differently. Are fans allowed to make their own Tea and Moonshine content? If Tea and Moonshine has inspired you to do something similar, I encourage you to give it a try. I have only 3 requests. Respect the layout you film on. Do not go staging live wrecks or smashing things. A lot of work goes into model railroads, and if you're filming on a club layout, you must be mindful of that. Number 2, put your own spin on it. Don't just directly copy Tea and Moonshine, add something to the concept to make it yours. Number 3, play all sides. Don't go hog wild on one side of things. In Tea and Moonshine, the Americans have had a go at the British, who have had a go at the Americans, who've had a go at the Canadians, who've had a go back at the Americans, and on and on. Basically, everyone takes a few lumps, everyone pokes back. Otherwise, let's see what you can come up with. One other thing I would prefer if you don't lean too heavily on established characters, make the majority of them your own. Will there be a complete video with the entire T&M series in it? Yes, it will go live a couple days after the finale. It is more than 4 hours long. If you're looking to binge Tea and Moonshine, that will be the way to do it, as the video will have fewer ad breaks. It will contain parts 1 through 24. Will there be a curtain call video featuring everyone and every model involved with Tea and Moonshine? It would be fun, but it's just not practical. The simple fact of the matter is that the people who helped with Tea and Moonshine in one way or another are scattered all over Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Virginia, and even Baden-Württemberg in southern Germany. There's probably a dozen people who have loaned models or otherwise assisted with Tea and Moonshine, and it would be quite an undertaking to get them all together in one place. That, and I'm not sure the NVMR layout could actually withstand that many models on it at once. It would more than fill the yard. Where can the shorts and future specials be found? My intention is to upload them on this same channel, and with the exception of the complete series video, all Tea and Moonshine videos will be added to the Tea and Moonshine playlist on my channel. When all else fails, check there. Why are there 2 yard goats, and are they related? Why are they just called yard goats? Will the yard goats start a cult? You may have noticed that very few rules are set in stone for the world of Tea and Moonshine, and the Yard Goat, Other Yard Goat, and Atlanta Yard Goat's names do break things a little. Basically, I wanted to make them a bit more generic. That and constantly saying the USRA 080 would have gotten tiresome for me and you. They're all the same design, and we do know they are a family from the Christmas special. Southern moves things around, so sometimes Spencer gets worked by 2 engines. Truth be told, the other gag came about when the club acquired another 080, and I thought, oh, that'd be funny. As for a cult, well, I don't know, would you start a cult with your cousins? Actually, don't answer that, I'd rather not know. There were a few questions looking for details on what vehicles are and aren't alive, and details therein. So I will try to answer those in one swoop here. As far as I'm concerned, if it has a motor, it's alive. Their food is fuel, or in the case of the trolleys, the fuel that generates their electricity. The rotary snowplow and crane are motorized, so they are alive, they just don't have much to say. While some of the engines tend to freelance, essentially they're running services for the Southern Railway of America, which somehow ended up having to lug a bunch of British wagons around. They can request jobs or try to hold back, but basically they work for the Southern. I got a rather morbid question about whether the engines can die. I guess if sufficiently pulverized so as to prevent rebuilding, yes, but frankly I hadn't given it much thought. Just to clean up the last of the points about the big boy. The big boy is acting more or less as a freelance heavy freight engine with the intelligence of a rather large dog. He wants what he wants, and for the most part he goes about his business, unless he is aware of a lead on the location of one of his surviving sisters, in which case he wishes to free them from the museums or parks they reside in. Another question was raised about how much influence Thomas the Tank Engine had on Tea and Moonshine. Tea and Moonshine's ancestors are mostly the various Talking Trains series on YouTube, like the Full Buccaneers, San Juan Branch Line, or the Iron Horseman Chronicles, which all seem to share some ancestry with or inspiration from Thomas. As for things directly based on Thomas the Tank Engine, I tried to go my own direction where possible, being more adult but not explicit or graphic. I recognized pretty early on that a wide swath of age ranges would watch Tea and Moonshine, so I tried to write it right down the middle of the road. That being said, there are a couple references if you look close enough. Now we're going to get into a few personal questions, with the biggest question following. Which locomotives are your personal favorites in real life? I have a hard time nailing down favorites, but in the top spots for steam would be the N&W M-Class 480, Pennsylvania Railroad K4, and Western Maryland K2 Pacific. For diesel, it would be the SD9 and SD40, with a special place for the CSX AC6000s. Electric, probably the GG1. What extinct steam locomotive would I want to bring back if I could? CNJ 460 Camelback number 774. She was weird, but pretty in her own way. She was so close to being preserved, and it's a shame she didn't make it. What's my favorite railway in real life? Again, I'm terrible at picking favorites, but a few top picks would be the Norfolk and Western, Western Maryland, Pennsylvania, CSX, and KCS. I do also have a little soft spot for both major Canadian roads. My model collection is pretty diverse, and, well, that leads into the next question pretty well. Do I collect more models beyond what's in the show? Yes, my collection is pretty widely varied, although the vast majority of it has found its way onto the channel in some form at this point. It sort of groups into these categories: N&W and PRR in the transition era, CSX and Amtrak of the 1990s. Then we start to get into sets I have, such as CPR 2816's Excursion Train or the Crescent Limited. How many engines do you own in total? I need to count again, but I think if you count the Tea and Moonshine models with the regular collection, it's probably around 50. What's your favorite non-train prop or gag used in the show? Bob the Cybertruck. Got that off eBay and painted it myself, as you can probably tell. Did you ever play in a crossover with another series? Part 17 was sort of a crossover with the guys who make Thomas's Model Misadventures at the Shortline Model Railroad Club in Ephrata, although the Thomas references were vague to try to avoid copyright and trademark issues. Would you ever revisit old episodes with a director's commentary? Well, I was looking at a video called The Tea Behind Tea and Moonshine, or some of the other members suggested the title The Brewing of Tea and Moonshine, but this video has stolen a fair bit of thunder out of that. Might look at a future version where I try to tell some of the stories from individual shoots, though. While not submitted as a question directly, I have been asked a couple times what I was smoking and or drinking when I wrote Tea and Moonshine. For the record, I do not smoke anything. As far as drinking, the most powerful stuff I touched was Coca-Cola. I don't even drink coffee under normal circumstances. Whether that makes Tea and Moonshine more impressive or downright concerning is a question yet to be answered, though. And last but certainly not least, why is Tea and Moonshine ending? This is a heavy topic and very personal, but I will try to share enough to help it make sense without oversharing. I will start by saying I did enjoy making Tea and Moonshine early on, but that joy began to fade around the creation of Part 7, which was a disastrous shoot that ran way over time and saw a sound decoder get blown out of one of Claude's engines. From there, the actual production started to become a problem, partly because the scope of the production kept growing with more and more characters, which meant more and more equipment to bring in and unpack. Early on, it was 2 boxes of trains I would bring into a shoot. Towards the end, it usually worked out to be 3 boxes and 2 bags plus my controllers. I was doing it because of the channel and because people enjoyed it. If I'm being honest, I grew to dread the process of making the serial. Writing Tea and Moonshine has gotten to be more difficult as it's gone on, and I think I've more or less scraped the bottom of the barrel, at least for ideas that would fit into an overarching narrative. I can still come up with the occasional one-off joke, and those will be used in shorts. Probably the biggest reason has to do with my mental health, to be honest. Without going into detail, I think I can say there have been a few times throughout my life where I was on a dark enough path that if people in my life had not pulled me aside, there's a chance that I wouldn't be here now. Over time, Tea and Moonshine, among other video projects, began to shift into more of a source of stress than a release of it. The shoot days, which could run 19 hours or so, did not help this at all. Basically, all of this came together, and after talking it over with a few people, I decided the best thing was to conclude Tea and Moonshine. I decided this was best not only for me, but for the serial, as if I forced it to drag on, it would eventually fall apart. It was getting harder to get up the energy to make it happen, and even then, it was deteriorating. That being said, I saw how people came to love Tea and Moonshine, so I didn't want to just dump it between videos and say that's all, as many similar series have ended. The decision was made back in the spring. Over the summer, I wrote out the conclusion and filmed the last few episodes as I could. The finale has been my project basically from June to August. I wanted to give the serial closure, for you, the viewers, and I suppose also for myself so that I could feel I'd seen it through to the end. Another factor is how, over the past 2 years, I have slowly slid from having model trains as a hobby to feeling like I mostly have videos as an obligation. Obligation to meet deadlines and make sure I'm still posting to schedule with fresh content. But this goes beyond Tea and Moonshine, but the serial played no small role in it. Is it goodbye forever? I don't think so. The shorts will go on as long as I can do them while maintaining my mental well-being. Could more full-length Tea and Moonshine content come in future? Maybe. It depends. A lot is changing in my life right now, and I can only guess what future circumstances will bring. Until then, what we do have is a 24-part comedy serial filmed, edited, and voiced by one guy that creates a full story arc. I suppose that, in and of itself, is worth something. One last question that fits best here. Do I have any beverage recommendations for watching the finale? With my lack of experience with alcohol, as mentioned before, I couldn't even begin to make a recommendation other than whatever you enjoy in a responsible amount. With that, we have reached the end of the questions, at least that I can reasonably get to in the time I've had to put this together. I've tried to cover as many topics as I could. Like I said, some of the questions I just have to leave for the finale to answer. I do apologize if I've missed any major questions or topics, but if needs be, I can do a follow-up down the road. Thank you so much for watching Tea and Moonshine, and I hope you will consider taking a look at my other videos as well. In the meantime, this is Jimmy Lambert speaking. Stay safe out there.